Welcome, everyone, to the Inclusion Podcast. I'm Dr. Julie Costin.
And I'm Dr. Christy Preddy-Franzak. We're so glad you're here as we explore all things inclusion.
So whether you're a school leader, an educator, a parent, or simply passionate about inclusion, this podcast is for you.
In each episode, we go beyond the usual conversations, diving into what truly makes inclusive education work.
Together, let's make a difference, one conversation at a time. Here we go. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Inclusion Podcast. This is episode 41. And if you listen to no other episodes, this is the only one you need. Okay?
I suspect if anybody goes back to episodes, we might say that every time.
No, this is the time I mean it. If I've ever said it before, I didn't mean it. I mean it now. Everybody listen, here's why. Today is about how we write about, talk about, and obviously think about students makes such a difference in their outcomes, who they are, and the opportunities that are given to them. So today is going to be about really thinking as educators, what are we writing down about children to give them the most access to the most things in all sorts of ways. So Christy, where do we see this coming up all the time?
Well, the main place is in IEPs here in the United States, though we do a lot of written reports, probably because of the white dominant culture's kind of love affair with accountability and things like that. But, we either have an eligibility report, a present level that's a form of a report. We have progress reports, OSEP reports, behavioral supports, reports.
Mm-hmm. All of them. And what really troubles me, and I need to just say it troubles me when I read present levels of educational performance. It troubles me when I hear words about kids that are usually an accumulation of some of their their deficits for sure, but also some of their worst things they've done. So desk throwers and hair pullers and runners and
being disrespectful, all of that. And, Julie, I think what's really powerful when we're doing PD, and maybe we can just invite listeners to do it for a minute, is like you always invite people to think back earlier in the day or, even another day and just take a snapshot. Like last night you said, what were you doing earlier today at 11 o'clock? And just pretend somebody was sitting next to you, writing down all the things they observed about you.
Mm-hmm.
How would you be depicted?
Yeah, it wouldn't be good. So that's the thing, is we use assessment in ways that we're taking a snapshot for sure, and it is useful in certain ways for sure. But the judgments that we're making and the things that we're writing and the things that we're saying may be true, Christy. So if they watched me yesterday at 11 o'clock, I think I was having a real hard time paying attention during a meeting.
Yes.
I won't name the school district in case they're listening. And certainly if you observed, you'd be worried about my attention. You'd be worried about my executive functioning skills. You'd be worried about my communication skills. There'd be a lot of things to worry about. At the same time, that snapshot is certainly not who I am. And it's certainly only a snapshot in time. So all this to say, just to get you all really as excited as we are about this podcast, is we're going to give you so many replacement words, replacement strategies. We're calling it language that lifts. And we're asking everybody to take out any report that they have and a highlighter and look for the language you're using to describe children, because honestly, it sets the stage for their future.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just letting that seep in for a minute, because Julie also said last night to a group of early educators that the story we tell about the student starts with you. And I would say, even if you're not an early educator, if you're writing an initial IEP, if you're writing some sort of observation that's during, when someone brings in a behavior team and says we have concerns, doesn't really matter the reason. You're starting the story about that kid. And as you mentioned, Julie, it's often not their best moment, because kind of our tradition is to look for the mistakes, the deficits, the delays, the disorders, the differences. Unfortunately, that's what we're like there to look at. How bad is it? When are they worst? When are they acting out?
Yeah.
And then that report follows them into perpetuity. You know, we were talking about a little kid the other day, and you were showing his present level, and it was like, that's something he did in second grade. And now he's in fourth grade, but that story's still coming with him.
That's right. And I also love to remind people to think about if they've done something in their lives that they're not proud of. And all of us probably can raise their hand, and many of us can think of things we've done even yesterday we weren't proud of. And imagine all that was written down, and imagine that was your introduction to anyone you met. And that is what special education sometimes can be. Now, many of you do not write reports that way. Many of you are only looking for the gifts, talents, and strengths of students. Many of you have restored students and make such a profound difference. And this is for kind of all of us who have been trained in sort of old-fashioned medical model, what's wrong with this kid and how can we fix them thinking. And today's going to offer a bunch of replacements. So, Christy, tell them about the download that goes with this episode.
Yeah, I'm going to do 3 things. I'm going to tell them about the download because we've kind of tantalized about it. I want to remind them about your task about the highlighter.
Yeah.
And then there was something else, but I forgot it. So we'll see. So the download, let's start there. There are going to be 60 replacements that we're going to explain what we mean by that. But instead of using words about being delayed or off grade level or a runner or a biter or distracted or in some way a problem, we're going to give you replacement words and phrases to use in your reports. You're going to want to go to inclusiveschooling.com/download 41, and you'll get this episode's handout, which is going to give you 60, as Julie said, replacement behaviors. Well, replacement for what? So let's go back to the highlighter. So find a report you've written, someone else has written, and you're going to highlight any of the words that you hear Julie and I mention, and or that as we give you examples, you're like, oh, I see another problematic. Sometimes Julie calls this turning lead to gold. So we're looking for heavy words that are lead, that are kind of dull, that are in fact harmful. And then we're going to go, let's turn them to gold, something that is useful, something that is productive. Okay, so that's your challenge. And the last thing Julie I wanted to say was, let's just acknowledge that we've given people mixed messages. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah.
Because I think it's going to be important if people are looking at their own reports or a district's form. Yeah.
Yeah. So these mixed messages is really important. And the mixed messages are that we in the field of special education have been told that we need to prove how disabled this kid is in order for them to get services. We need to be able to justify the reason for their special education services by letting everybody know in writing just how bad it is. And the problem with that thinking, I mean, I could probably name 10 problems with that thinking, but one problem with that thinking is it solidifies in everybody's minds, hearts, and souls a problematic look at a student. And you don't have to have language that is crushing on a report in order to qualify for special education. Families don't have to hear continually how many standard deviations below the norm they are on this particular thing. Yesterday, we were talking about butterflies, and I was thinking about all the different kinds of beautiful butterflies that exist in the world. And imagine if you could have on one piece of paper, one photo of all the butterflies that exist in the world. And then we say, which one's the standard butterfly? And then we're like, yep, the monarch is the standard butterfly. And now we're going to measure every other butterfly by the monarch, meaning there are 2 color deviations away from that deep orange. There are several dot deviations away from the number of spots, right? And it's a really problematic way to look at kids is in a norm referenced way. And so much of this language is moving away from comparing this child to quote unquote the norm. So I don't know if I answered it because I started talking about butterflies.
No, it's really super helpful. And it's just a reminder that we're going to ask people to hold the tension of those mixed messages that a state or a district's interpretation of eligibility requires a norm reference tool or a compilation of deficits. But we're going to give you some workarounds so that we spend less time thinking about until we can change that particular practice around norm referenced or that particular practice around deficit mindset, old-fashioned thinking, there are places in the report where we can absolutely change our language that has nothing to do with eligibility. And one of those is for sure the IEP. People all the time try to reestablish eligibility in the present level, and we don't need to be doing that. So we won't go into that. That's another podcast, but you want to go to inclusiveschooling.com/download 41 because Julie and I are going to start walking through 60 replacement behaviors or how to turn something that is lead. So we have 60 examples of lead statements, and then how we would turn those to gold as we restory students. So Julie, do you want to say anything else about the handout, or you want to start picking a couple?
Yeah, I'm just going to start off. The title of the handout is called Language That Lifts, Simple Shifts for Powerful IEP Language. If I were you and I work in a school system and created IEPs, I would print this for everybody who does the same. And we kick off the handout by really talking about how we write about and think about students directly impacts the way we offer services and provide them support. And we really move into our habit or tradition that's sometimes even unconscious, which is looking at what we call the roots of failure rather than the roots of success. So we've got 4 simple guideline shifts. So these are bigger ways to think, and then 60 specific word replacements. Okay. So the 4 simple guideline shifts, I'll just pick. Oh, Christy, I love them all so much. Okay. Envision, I'm going to pick number 2, envision future potential. Instead of thinking, so it just says, I'll read it to you all. Envision future potential. Focus on what the child might achieve with time guidance and specially designed instruction. Okay. So instead of saying, what's wrong with the kid? How do we fix it? We say, what's possible with this student with the right supports? Do you see how much better that is to just imagine what's possible, right? This child right now, let's say, is reading at a 2nd grade level, and with the proper supports and experience and maturation, we expect them to be reading at a 4th grade level by the end of the year. And so you're just using the metrics, okay, but you're saying this is really possible given what's going on with this student right now and all the beautiful supports we have in place. Pick your guideline shift, Christy.
Oh, I'm with you. I'm actually going to stay on yours for a minute.
Great.
So the other part of that one, which was the envision future potential, was to convey hope and forward-looking perspective that inspires growth and possibility. I'll pick this one, Julie, because it's grounded in appreciative inquiry, which has tons of research to support systems change or organizational change can be from a strength-based approach. Oftentimes when people want to do systems level change or organizational change, they go, what's not working? What do we have to fix? What are we going to, kind of put a red dot on and get rid of? Instead of appreciative inquiry says, hey, how can we have this forward-looking perspective? How can we focus on growth and possibility? And by doing that, we can get to change. So the same thing happens with students. When we look at their strengths, when we look at possibilities and areas for growth, we can get to the outcomes we want, which is for the student to be more independent or successful with interdependence or get their wants and needs met or have mobility. Whatever it is we desire, or that even the student themselves desires, is possible by having this different approach. And sometimes I think people think, oh, we're just putting on rose-colored glasses, we're being Pollyanna, we're not even looking at the needs.
Okay. So we both love envision future potential, and there are 4 more guideline shifts that you're going to want to look at. And I think each one is more powerful than the next. So we love them so much.
And again, I guess, Julie, we'll just say we're reading from and talking from the download for this episode, which is inclusiveschooling.com/download 41.
Okay, I'm just going to read some of the what I call negative words, or what Christy just referred to as the lead words, or the words that feel heavy. Or if you're looking at a report, look for a word that you wouldn't yourself want to be called. Like Christy.
Great way. Yeah.
Christy, would you want to be called inflexible?
Oh,
Might it be true about you?
I don't know why you came up with that example so easily.
It was number 3 on the list, but I thought about it.
Okay.
Yeah. I was just looking at it. So I was like, well, Christy, would you like to be called inflexible? No, thank you. Might you sometimes be inflexible? Sure. Let's talk about struggling, non-compliant, inflexible, low engagement, behavioral issues, underperforming, resistant, passive, dependent. Ugh, I'm only
Now
read
you're just describing me wholly.
no, but I've only read 9 of the words of the 60, and any one of those is too heavy to carry.
Yeah.
Meaning, we feel like it's not a problem to write this stuff down about kids, and yet it's not the full picture and it's not the honest picture.
Well, and Julie, let's just go a couple more because this describes what you're saying at your meeting the other day. Distracted, unmotivated, lacking focus, maybe impulsive,
Oh, yeah.
hyperactive, I don't know, uncooperative, low self-esteem. I mean,
Yeah.
oh,
I had just cut my own bangs that day, and I was very obsessed with how they looked in the Zoom feature, and I was fixing them the whole time. Anyways, all that to be said, yes, I am distracted. I am sometimes unmotivated. I do lack focus sometimes, yes. And I don't want to be talked about that way. I don't want to be thought about that way. I certainly don't want it written down about me because it's not wholly true about me.
right.
So
Yeah.
let's talk for a minute. Just unmotivated is where we are. Responds. So here's a quick flip, a quick switch. Instead of saying this kid is unmotivated, they respond to interest-driven learning activities.
Mm.
I am the most motivated person on earth if I love the task.
Yeah,
Right?
for sure. For sure.
The second one, I thrive with meaningful real-world connections or engages with personalized reinforcement strategies, meaning I can put something in place to reinforce myself. I do not mean a sticker chart or something that someone else is
Well, actually, you do, but it's not a sticker chart that I would make. You just like stickers and you like to do with them what you want.
Well, that's the thing is I didn't want to confuse people because
Oh, good point.
yeah, it's so
Yeah, because you don't
confusing.
want yeah.
Right.
Behavior charts.
No, we don't want a behavior chart. So, all this to be said, there are words that lift, that describe it better, that describe more wholly, that describe with possibility students. And we want IEPs littered with those words because we're creating the story of who they are and who they will be and who they might be. And unfortunately, families believe the words that are written about their children by professionals.
And students, we believe, I mean, I believe what my doctors write about me, my therapists, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And I guess one thing I wanted to say is people look at the handout, which again is at inclusiveschooling.com/download 41, is that sometimes turning lead to gold or restoring or taking your highlighter and finding single words and then replacing them. It's hard to go from one word, Julie, to another one word. And so I think we need to remind folks of that and maybe give one example before we wrap up this episode. But you'll notice as Julie gives the examples, she didn't have a one-to-one word replacement.
Yeah, that's really important. So I'm just going to pick disorganized because I'm imagining anyone listening has had a student that seems disorganized.
And we highlighted disorganized. That was easy. It was one word we found.
Yeah.
It's heavy. We see it all the time. Okay, then what?
This is just a reframe for that. So developing systems to managing materials in time or benefiting from structured tools with strategies for organization and learning to prioritize tasks with support. None of those are single word replacements, but all of those are much more true of what's going on for the student. It's not just simply there's a disorganization gene that they don't have or an organization gene that they don't have. It means they're learning, they're growing, and they need support. And that's what you're describing as opposed to something that feels very fixed in time, disorganized.
Yep, I'll do one quickly. Disengaged. So again, there's several iterations of disengaged, and you'll find them all in our list of 60, from unmotivated to uninterested to, this one, disengaged, one word. But let's look at the 3 replacements, and you'll see that they have some options or some variability and some length to them. So you can make them your own. You can make them so that they actually match. You don't want to be inauthentic. You don't want to sugarcoat. You don't want to misrepresent something that is a concern. But for disengaged, the one idea is feels engaged and responsive when the environment matches their needs. that tells me something. I know now as an educator or even as a parent, what do I need to do? And it doesn't mean that we're succumbing to their every wish and demand, but we really need to think about how are we matching the environment to what they need versus making them try to adapt to our environment. Another one is benefits from strategies to reduce distractions, clarify expectations, and provide support. Again, the onus is on me, not for the kid to be less distracted, but for me to recognize and reduce distractions. And then again, instead of disengaged, thrives when flexibility, curiosity, and creativity are fostered. I mean, doesn't that sound like fun? How can I help this student become more curious or allow them to be creative with this task versus they're just disengaged, they're not interested?
That's right. And Christy, I just have a related closing for today. It's related even though it's not on this handout, but what I want folks to hear and listen to is it's really depends on what you look for. So when you're thinking about a kid with challenging behavior, of course you can describe in detail the time that they cut someone's hair with scissors or the time that they ran or knocked over a desk. But what you really want to pay attention to and study is the time they were really engaged, a time they were really connected, a time they were really kind to a friend. We've been studying the wrong things. Of course, bad behavior happens, and we have many podcasts about that. But if you study the success minutes of a child, you're going to be much, much further along in helping them to become more and more successful.
And Julie, I just really appreciate you reminding us of that because you and I are also working on our language around challenging behavior. So we often say a kid that has behaviors that challenge us versus a kid with challenging behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
They're sound like a little bit the same, a little bit semantics, but let's say I call you in as a behavior specialist and I say, this kid has tons of challenging behaviors. Now you are going to set forth and look for all of those challenging behaviors I've mentioned.
Yeah.
If I say, hey, Julie, this kid has really got some behaviors that are challenging me, you might say, oh, well, when have you had success with that student? When are you guys doing well together? So it's already shaping not only what we look for, but the conversation and solutions we offer.
Beautiful. Thank you, Christy. Everybody get the download, and you can give them out as handouts for presents too. So print them out, hand them out, or wallpaper your school bathroom with them.
Then you'll get listed for a whole other behavior.
Or fire hazard. Thank you for tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe and catch up on past episodes where we share valuable insights, straight talk, and practical steps to challenge outdated special education practices. You can find every episode with the show notes at inclusiveschooling.com/inclusion-podcast to build more inclusive schools together.